Nigeria has the third highest burden of HIV and AIDS in the world. About 3.5 million people are estimated to be living with HIV/AIDS in Nigeria, and the estimated number of new infections is put at 250,000. My guest talks about steps by the government to eliminate HIV/AIDS from Nigeria by 2030. Hello there, thank you for joining me on the program this week. I'm Gloria Umezuke. According to the National Agency for the Control of AIDS, Nigeria HIV prevalence rate as at 2013 stands at 3.4%, lower than the 3.6% reported in 2007. As Nigeria joins the rest of the world to mark the World AIDS Day, we will be looking at the fight to end HIV/AIDS in Nigeria in our interview this week. And coming up next, Nigeria is 10% away from reaching the 2020 goal of eliminating new HIV/AIDS infections in the country, at which point the number of new infections would equal the number of those on treatment. Take a listen. Statistics by the United Nations Programme on HIV and AIDS reveals that Nigeria bears a heavy burden of the HIV/AIDS pandemic in Africa, with about 3.5 million people living with the virus and a record of 250 new infections in 2015 alone. As Nigeria joins the rest of the world to mark the World AIDS Day, this conference considered ways and strategies for reaching the 2020 target of new infections.
Here in Nigeria, we have seen a steady decline in the prevalence of HIV from a peak of 5.8% of the population in 2001 to 3% in 2014. We are only 10% away from reaching the magic tipping point.
However, the national coordinator of the International Community of Women Living with HIV in West Africa decries the lack of access to medication by her members.
It may interest you to know that out of 3.4 million people living with HIV in Nigeria, only about 800,000 are currently receiving the life-saving medication.
When it was time for the Minister of State for Health to address the audience, the conference was thrown into a rowdy session as a group of women and children living with HIV/AIDS staged a protest right inside the hall. And the leader of the protest states their demands.
We are really using this opportunity to really cry to the government to come out to give us a listening ear, to increase budget in Nigeria, to give us a listen so that lives of people in HIV, will live a healthy lives in the country.
When the minister was finally allowed to speak, he assures the protesters of government's determination to address their demands.
We have strong advocates in many civil societies and also in the ministers. The two ministers are doctors, and we do care for all who we are treating.
Of the over 36 million people living with HIV/AIDS around the globe, Africa is home to 70% of this population. Participants at this conference say this is not the time for long speeches. It's time instead for governments in the region to walk the talk. In the interview we have this week, the Director General of the National Agency for the Control of AIDS provides insights into government's efforts to eliminate new HIV infections. Dr. Sani Aliyu, welcome to the program.
I'm delighted to be here, Gloria.
Well, let's talk about the just concluded 2016 HIV/AIDS Prevention Conference. What really are the major highlights from there?
So we've had a really interesting conference over the last 3 days. We had well over 1,400 participants and several international speakers. The main aim of the conference was really to look at how to prevent HIV transmission, look at the research that's been coming out, and whether we need to be doing anything different in Nigeria to help us reach our target in terms of eliminating AIDS by 2030.
So when you say doing anything different, give us a sense of what really is going on at the moment. What's the situation like in Nigeria?
So we estimate there are about 3 million people infected with the virus, of which we are treating about 900,000, so close to 1 million, which gives you a prevalence of about 3%, which in other words means that we have a significant gap that we need to close. HIV treatment has really changed over the years. A key point is HIV can now be treated. You can live a normal life. Having HIV is no longer a death sentence, and that's the message we wanted to bring out.
You mentioned a prevalence rate of 3 million. That was as at 2012. I know in 2013 there was an estimate of some sort. 2015 we really had nothing. Even 2016. Let's understand, everything just seems hazy.
The prevalence has been coming down, and the prevalence has been coming down not only in Nigeria but worldwide, partly because of the rollout of antiretroviral therapy. We know that with antiretroviral treatment, you're able to get rid of the virus within your bloodstream. In other words, be virologically suppressed, and that significantly reduces the transmission rate from 20 per thousand to just 1 per thousand, 96% reduction. So we think that, plus all the other prevention measures, the barrier measures that we talk about, the use of condoms, being faithful, etc., has resulted in the prevalence figures worldwide for HIV coming down. It's still a problem, no doubt. 3 million people is 3 million too many.